What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here at the Western Hunting Conservation Expo. So if you hear a little buzz in the background, man, that's just the energy of the show. And speaking of energy, I've got Mr. Dan Staton across from me right now. ElkShape podcast, always doing stuff. And ABT, always be tinkering.
Yeah.
Dan, what is ABT? What are you referring to? What are you tinkering with all the time?
That's a good question. Well, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
Good to see you. Mark and I go back.
Way
we
back.
met in 2009-ish.
Long time ago.
Yeah. We both have daughters named Avery.
This is true.
We both work out a lot. We both eat really healthy.
One of those things is true.
We both love breaking a sweat.
That's true.
We both archery hunt exclusively.
That is not true. I'm always trying to get you to embrace the rifle. I love to bow hunt, but you got to embrace the rifle.
Oh yeah. So ABT is it's not changing things to just change things, but it's kind of a mindset of, even rifle guys probably could appreciate this, is like,
100%.
I want perfection out of my equipment, and I ain't going to stop until I find the thing that works the best for me. So it does kind of require you to never be satisfied, but get darn close. And really at the end of the day, it's just I want to head to the field with the most confidence in my equipment and that I've turned over every stone and figured out what works best for me.
Yep. So safe to say you're predominantly a bow hunter.
Yeah.
And the topic of today's conversation of your tinkering, of your always tinkering, is your arrow setup. I feel like there's a lot of things in bow hunting that you can tinker with, but maybe few that you can tinker with more than your arrow, your broadhead, your insert, your outsert. What vanes are you shooting? What nocks are you shooting? There's a lot that goes into an arrow.
Yeah.
And so your arrow, I'm sure throughout your life, like a lot of us, you've had an arrow evolution.
Yes.
And what we're going to talk about today, Dan, is where you're at in your arrow evolution, maybe like what you used last year for deer and elk. Was it the same arrow? Were they different arrows?
Right.
And because you're always tinkering, it'll likely be different tomorrow. So this is a snapshot in time.
Dude, it's not...
But I like that, though, because we could talk about your setup today. Next year, we could do the same thing. You'd be like, oh, I did this, I learned that. You know what I mean? I think that's important.
That's cool. I started bow hunting in 2001, so we're back in the day when Easton was making just aluminum arrows, XX, insert whatever number, I can't remember, maybe 23. So aluminum shafts, no big deal. That's what you did. Then the carbon evolution kind of came out, and, man, I Hunter something from Easton's and Beeman, which is now owned by Easton. I shot Beeman's, ICH Hunters, I think. Then at some point I went to, and I'm just primarily an elk hunter, whitetail hunter, so I would use the same arrow for both.
Okay.
Bull metal jackets.
Sure.
Those captured my attention forever.
Well, because then you didn't have to make a decision because you had aluminum and carbon.
I got best of both worlds, right? And those are still a great arrow. I would stand behind FMJs all day, and it's a cool name. Full metal jacket.
Oh, man, and they had, that diamond plating, on the, or at least the appearance of. It was a solid look,
Yeah, you ran them, I ran them, we all ran them. So some people still do, that's cool. And then at some point, I was like, oh, Easton makes a Easton Axis, 5 millimeter, kind of like a little smaller than your standard 6 millimeter arrow. Let me check that out. Did that for a while and loved it. And meanwhile, every arrow that I'm getting kind of has different component systems to it, and I'm learning the ins and outs. But I'm just going to kind of bring you along the journey. From there, I started dabbling with Victory, because they kind of were coming out with these lighter GPI arrows, and it kind of had my attention because I'd been shooting elk with 525 grain arrows. And again, I'm a short draw length, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
what is your draw length?
27 with some manufacturers and 26.5 with some other manufacturers.
Okay, gotcha.
So somewhere in there short. And energy is important, and I like to build everything around an elk.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there,
you can kind of work your way back.
Work my way back.
Yeah.
And that's been nice to have an arrow that can do it all, right? And I know guys that hunt maybe coos deer, or antelope, like these small, skittish, crazy animals like axis that just maybe they want a lighter trajectory. I get it, but for me, I've always kind of liked an all-purpose arrow. And then I'd say, then I kind of dabbled into the 4 millimeters. That's like one of the smallest, like formerly known as like Deep Six type system. And I messed with Pro Comps. They don't make those anymore. I think they're discontinued, but now it's the X10 Parallels from Easton.
Okay.
The most winningest arrow on planet Earth for target archery. So what works for them has got to work for bow hunting. And then also just Easton Axis long range.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got the TKOs from Victory. That's in a 4 mil as well. Pierce Platinums from Gold Tip. A bunch of other brands. So I've just been trying to be brand agnostic and just try everybody's and kind of hone in on what I liked. So current arrow.
Well, and I would say, it's a person like in your position, like your content creator, you've got, partnerships, but like also like you're trying to create content that is, educational, informational to your viewers, to your listeners. So like to have that flexibility in an area where there are so many options and there's so much, so many things that you can do to find out, like, it's nice to be able to provide that information. Like, I tried this is what I liked, this is what I didn't like, this might work for you, whatever. So I think that's important. And
that's the truth. Like, I want to like know everybody's offering. Doesn't mean like I'm told to say this or that. I just want to know what everyone has to offer and share that information with the audience. So last year for elk season, I had probably my lightest arrow to date. It was 425-ish.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Pretty much on the lighter side. And it seems like the last 5 years I've tried to drop about 10 to 15 grains total arrow weight. Just trying to test the limits. I like a flatter trajectory. Mm-hmm. I still need it to be hard hitting.
That's interesting to hear, though, because a lot of people are, they're going the other way. There's kind of been a trend to go the other way.
I'm going the opposite way, everybody. Yeah. And I'm seeing great results. And I'm finding that it's more important to have perfect arrow flight out of your bow so that you're transferring all the energy to that arrow and leaking little energy.
Efficiency.
It's all about that. And I'm finding that you put that arrow where it's supposed to be, it's going to do great. Now, I know that bow hunting's not perfect, but I would rather have an arrow that doesn't hit perfect, but it came out of my bow perfect. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like maybe I missed my mark, but I delivered the most efficient energy projectile. And with today's bows, I'm running Matthews. I'm seeing so much efficiency in their cam system that I'm very confident with a 420 grain arrow. And I may drop even lighter this year a little bit and hunt elk with it. Typically, I will run with a little bit heavier arrow for whitetail, and it's just more of a people like lose their mind when I say that. They're like, how could you go so light for an elk, which is arguably a stronger, heavier, bigger animal, and then yet with a whitetail, to go heavier? Here's the deal. I rarely shoot at a whitetail less than 30 yards. I killed 3 whitetail bucks in 2023. First shot was 20 yards for a Washington buck. I went to Texas, and I killed one at 31 yards and 38 yards.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I won't shoot at a whitetail past 40 yards for me. And I'm not putting my stuff on other people. I'm just telling you, like, I've been bow hunting whitetails for 24 years. I like to shoot them with archery equipment, and I just 40 yards is pushing it for me. And so why not go a little heavier arrow, maybe a cut-on contact arrow, but just know that if I only get presented, you're in the saddle, you're in your platform, what have you, and you're like, you see that buck, and that's your shot opportunity. I'm looking at where that arrow is going to exit. And sometimes I like the confidence in disregarding what I'm going to go through, knowing that I'm going to get through that, but
Gotcha.
Where's that angle going to exit? And we've talked about this on the phone this year.
You're trading some trajectory for, overall penetration.
Yeah.
Like, hey, maybe I've got a little bit more of a quartering 2 shot, or I know I've got a hard quartering away shot, and I want to run through a lot of that animal, having the confidence for that arrow to get where it needs to go, yeah?
And the scale of a whitetail hunt for me is very much controllable. Like the scale being, that's 40 yards, that's my circumference, that is my diameter from where I'm at. And I can judge yardage extremely well if need be. If that buck steps 3 yards off that trail, that's 36 and a half. I don't have much of a margin. I'm going to be all right. You take me out elk hunting, and a bull comes screaming in and catches me drawn, sprints, I cow call, he stops. I don't know, Mark. Is he 43 and a half? Is he 45 and a half? Like, I don't have as big of margins. I need to have a tighter trajectory profile to mitigate the more topography terrain that's available to elk hunting. So for me and my speeds, my setup, I just want a tighter trajectory for elk. But if I could have that same trajectory that I get on whitetail, I would do that, but I don't. You know, and that arrow's going to do more arcing, more lobbing. I'm going to miss low, miss high, worse yet, wound. So I err on the little bit of lighter side with a super tuned bow and a super tuned arrow for elk. And then, yeah, when I'm going with whitetail with a more controlled scenario, man, get me a 500 grain arrow. It don't matter to me. I'm just going to stick within my parameters, which is 40 and under.
Yep. I've shot a couple whitetail bucks at, like, basically right at 50 yards, but that's 2, right? And, like, at least in the Midwest, which that's where I shot both those bucks, but outside of those situations, there's been very few where I could even shoot that far. Like, the country just doesn't lend itself to it. Like, it's too thick. There's too many limbs. There's too many trees. There's too much brush. You know, you're just not gonna get a clear shot, you know, to those ranges. So, like I said, I think, you know, 40 and in. I mean, a lot of spots I hunt, like you said, 30 and in. You know, some spots I can only shoot 20 yards. I hunted a spot last year where 15 yards, like, I crawled into this just nasty hole. I'd never been in there before, and I was like, man, this place kind of sucked, actually. But I snuck in there. I'm like, I'm gonna hunt it. I had a couple hours, and I had a fork buck. Just probably, I think I snuck in on him. I don't think he was bedded that far away. It was earlier in the season, like mid-October or something like that. And he came into shooting range, actually walked right under my stand. He was just a fork buck, so I didn't, you know, try and kill him. But so it actually worked. But, like, I set up, like, the best spot was, like, I could shoot 15 yards. That was the most open spot that I could get in there. So
that's tight, and I like that for deer. Quite honestly,
yeah.
It's intimate. But I think for your audience, like, I want to encourage them. Like, here's the road to go down. Like, because there's a lot of times I'll get messages like, here's my setup. Is this good enough for elk? And honestly, 9 times out of 10, it's like 1,000%. That's plenty for elk. You're spending too much time majoring in the minors. What you want to spend your time in, like, the rabbit hole you really want to go down is the art of, like, working on your own equipment and understanding your equipment, your tuning. Like, do you know how to check to see if your bow is in time? Mm-hmm. Do you understand the difference of wheeling or looking at, like, moving the cams left to right, your string angle, so that that arrow comes out absolutely perfect, finding center shot, geeking out on your serving width and your knock fit and your string angle, and becoming a robot. Archery is all about robotics. It's doing the same thing, whether it be bad or poor. If you can do it every time the same time, you're going to shoot awesome, and you're going to send a perfect energy arrow down. Then once you've done that, which will take you your whole life, then you can dabble.
Which you'll never be done with, by the way.
Yeah, you'll never be done, but you could dabble and worry about these arrow things. I think a lot of guys freak out about arrow weights, and I think that we are all in the weeds. We just need to focus back on tuning and testing for yourself. Figure out what gives you the most confidence.
For sure. Well, if you can share, like, your elk arrow this year, like, what were the components that were going in? Like, what did you like, yeah, I settled on this for XYZ, this is what I'm running. Maybe this isn't what you're going to be running next year or whatever, but
yeah. So right now I'm leaning towards what I'm running currently, which is a Easton Axis 4mm match grade long range. So meaning it's one of the straightest arrows they make, .001 tolerances. It's expensive arrow, but you don't have to buy the match grades. If you're just going to target, go to the non-match grades and save the match grades for elk hunting. You know, those are your actual hunting arrows. But that's what I'm running. For the components, I've tried a couple different setups. The one I'm leaning towards right now is just their tried and true. It's a half out. Those not my favorite, but it's an Easton half out. It's titanium, weighs 55 grains. So the GPI on a 300 spine Easton Axis is 9.4, which is about as heavy as I want to go. But that gives me an opportunity to manipulate the front end with some, like, different type of components, and allows me to go up in weight. So I'm running a 125 grain broadhead versus a 100. And I like to put the weight in the actual broadhead, the dude doing the work. So 55 grain component, 125 grain front end. That's my total for up front. And then in the back end, we have a wrap that's cut short, so it just sticks out long enough the veins to go on. I'm running these one veins, man, I kind of like overlooked, and I'm just in love with them. I'm running for a year. They're AAE Hybrid HP standing for high profile.
Okay.
They are a little loud, but gosh darn it, they steer a fixed broadhead like no other. Like, and I'm talking long range broadhead shots. I love, if I can shoot a broadhead and a fill point together at 100 yards, which is ridiculous. I would never shoot that at animals. But I'm like, okay, that's perfect arrow flight. That's a tuned bow. Then, and those do it. So then I, put that in my quiver. I'm like, my bow's good to go. So it's kind of one of my tests I do.
That's the noise from veins. That's something. And there's probably people out there like they've done the research, they've done the the testing, the things like that. But I guess a question I've always asked myself with that, like, what is outweighing? Like, does one outweigh the other, or are they both extremely important? Is one less important? But you have your bow goes off, it's gonna make some noise
for sure.
We're super blessed with how quiet our bows are today, though. I will say that. Like, how important is that little bit extra vein noise? I don't know. Like, it's actually truly a question. Maybe we should do some sort of like crazy testing sometime.
Really good friends with Bill from Iron Will, and he's got the university. He's got all the things, the high frame rate cameras, like Phantoms, and all the sound test devices. And he's got a study that he's going to publish real soon, breaking down some of the most popular veins. But I know for a fact the vein that Bill uses on his hunting arrow is loud. Like, just, that's a louder, you'll hear it. And here he is running it, and he's the scientist. And here I am literally admitting that I run a pretty loud vein, but I'm willing to, like, accept that because of the results of the steering and the group size, long range. It's like, I'll take a little sound.
Right.
To have the confidence to know that arrow's going to hit where I'm aiming. Then, one thing I've seen with some broadheads is they'll cut them out and vent them, right, in the front. And you can hear them really, they're coming. And the arrow's just screaming, duck. It is kind of like you got to weigh everything and decipher what's going to give you the most confidence. But for me, I'm okay to accept a little bit of noise. Now, if my bow is loud, my arrow's loud because the veins are loud, and I got a vented broadhead and it's loud, I don't think that's a good program.
You're kind of like compounding loudness.
But my bow's so quiet. I don't have vented on the front. I got a little, I'll take it. And I got really good results last year on every animal I shot. So far, so good.
Awesome. So that's the arrow. That's the veins. The broadhead you've been running is?
Man, that's tough. Last year, I tested a lot. I will say this. For the fixed broadhead, I have the budget one is like the tried and true Grim Reaper Micro Hades 3 or 4 blade. Just flies like a dart. Does really well. I've put them through scaps on bulls. Probably use that more than anything. But usually I kind of, as a solo guy that doesn't have a collar, I'm calling, a lot of times I'll have elk come in at really crazy angles. I like to run a cut on contact. So Iron Will, a single bevel, 125 grain. I did use a wide. Finally, they make a wider version. I shot a whitetail with that last year. Kind of leaning towards that for 2024 for elk.
For elk, okay.
Yeah, just cut on contact with bleeders, wide.
Gotcha.
But in my quiver will always be an expandable for follow-up shots because maybe I made a okay shot, but if I can get an opportunity to do a follow-up shot, I'm always going to take it. As a seasoned elk hunter, you shoot when you can. So I ran lots of expandables on animals last year. Was fortunate enough to go down to Texas and do testing on real critters. I got a lot of confidence. That my two top favorite right now is probably like the Sever, like a 1.5 or a 1.75, and then that one from it's called the Beast. I don't know much about it, but it is probably the sharpest broadhead I've ever handled.
Wild.
Be careful. And that thing did really well too. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool stuff. Any fancy stuff going on in your Nocks? Are you switching out Nocks, going with the stock Nock?
No, I usually go with AE IP4 or IP5. That 4 is for 4 millimeter, 5 is for 5 millimeter. But the serving that I run on my bow and the tolerances I'm looking for, those seem to have the nice, good little consistent fit. So I think that's an overlooked one. I really think folks need to look at knock pinch. Put your arrow on your string when it's in a press and just kind of pull the string back a little, let go, it should come out.
Okay,
if it's
gotcha.
like stuck there, you're like, could affect your arrow flight, and there's lots of rabbit holes to explore on that, but just pay attention to nock fit and your serving size. It matters.
Interesting. You know, you've talked about a lot of stuff today. So wait, so that was your elk setup. Any differences in your, so you said was your whitetail setup the same but just heavier than that you went this year, or was it different arrow? What's going on there?
Yeah, so essentially it was the same arrow, Easton Axis 4 mil with the titanium half out, but instead of a 125, I went to 150 grain.
Oh, no kidding, huh?
Wide, you know, and so it weighed 485, whereas my elk arrow weighed 420, 425, so it was significant. It did crush the whitetail, but I think any arrow would, because I actually made a decent shot.
You didn't have any like super hard quartering through the shoulder blade, stuff like that, yeah.
Buck fever, and I definitely did not hit where I thought I was going to hit. Like I aimed right behind the crease, kind of in that vital V, and I hit a little bit more back of the lungs, both lungs. The deer went 58 yards and piled up.
Don't like that, yeah.
Didn't like it, but I was a little surprised, and I'm like, well, I was pretty excited on that deer actually, but yeah, pretty stoked on the results. I do like that wider, that makes warm fuzzies is the word I use. Like it gives me more warm fuzzies, if you will. So, and that's important for everybody to just find the warm fuzzy feeling that gives you confidence, and then go. You know.
Yeah. When you're out there with as few question marks as possible, that's a good place to be and having that confidence. You know, and then sometimes that confidence comes with learning hard lessons, or fantastic wins, right? That'll give you a lot of confidence as well. So
I think don't be afraid to test. Like have your own lab in your own backyard. Get a set of build arrows. Build 3 or 4 this configuration. It could be little nuances. I want to run a 1 degree offset, a 3 degree offset, a 5 to the left, or whatever, and just go shoot a group. Go see what your bow likes, but make sure your bow is super tuned first and foremost, and then go see what works for you. It's always mind-blowing to get something that you really like and you've tuned, set that aside, and then try to talk yourself out of that with some other crazy ideas, and usually you'll come back to, no, that's what gives me the most confidence. That seems to have the best results for me.
Yeah. I mean, that like elevates that confidence too, because you're like, well, this works, but then you're like, this doesn't, and then you're like, okay, and maybe you do make a change, but if you don't, you're like, okay, yep, that's the one, let's go, let's go hunt.
And then there's guys out there that like have the same thing that's worked for them for 20 years or 30 years, and they're like, why change? No argument. Hey,
I know.
I get it.
I'm still searching. I'm searching for the one.
I say that on video all the time when it comes to broadheads. I'm just like, I'm still searching for the one, and it's a cool search because there's some great options out there.
It's tough to get married in that broadhead world.
Yeah, I don't know if you should. There's always good ones coming out. So,
but cool, Dan. Man, I appreciate it. I mean, anything else to add on to that, or?
No, man. I think just the last thing I'll say, since we're talking about archery, which is dear and near to my heart, man, is like we have a series going on right now on our YouTube channel where I'm shooting like an all-star in my backyard. Everybody is. And I went to shoot my first 3D course, and I scored the lowest score I've ever scored, and I was like literally rusty. And I was like, wow, 6 months goes by. I'm really good in my backyard. So I just want to encourage everyone, don't be a backyard all-star. Please, challenge yourself, write down your scores, measure it, manage it, compete with your friends, get the stakes to be higher. It'll make you better, and it'll bolster your confidence come fall, which is what we all want.
Dude, I love it, man. Dan, thanks. It's always a pleasure. Always great to see you. This was a fun one. Boy, there's not more things that you could probably talk about or have opinions about than arrows, but I think a lot of what you said here makes sense. We'll see what stays or goes, next year. I mean, that's part of the fun too, right? Gear is fun, learning is fun, and hunting is fun, and it's always a learning process. I know you're the consummate student when it comes to that stuff, so all really cool stuff. So thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully you found this information helpful. I know I did. Shoot your bow, get it tuned. I'm talking to myself too, and we'll catch you on the next one. Good luck this fall.